Hello, fourth graders. Mrs. Helene here, and we're back at it with reading. Today, we're going to be reading to find character traits and evidence. We want students to be able to use dialogue and actions of the character to pick an appropriate character trait. We've had some great lessons already. We're going to use this paper as a review. There is an anchor chart stapled to your reading papers that you should have taken home from school. This anchor chart talks about the 3 lessons that we've had so far. So if you look at number 1, that was Mr. Maloney's lesson about finding the mood of the story, using the character's feelings and the facts or the setting to figure out the overall feeling of the story. And the second lesson was my lesson, where we were talking about how historical fiction is complex text, and it's really important to keep track of the who, the what, the where, the when, to try to keep everything. I try to keep track of everything and fit the pieces together. And then the third lesson was Mrs. Thalen's lesson, where we were talking about every historical fiction book having a historical timeline, and it's important to keep track of what's happening in history and figure out how that history might be affecting the main character's timeline. Today's lesson is going to be all about finding character trait words that are appropriate for your characters and good evidence to prove that. You may remember this anchor chart from Unit 1 when we were talking about character traits and evidence to prove it back then. We will be using character traits for characters like that kind of describe how they are on the inside instead of what they look like on the outside. So, to kind of show you an example of that, I have some character trait words on this anchor chart here that you can use however you'd like. You will have to be thinking about characters and appropriate words that fit your character. So if you're noticing your character is frequently nice, you might use words like bright, cheerful, caring, charming, considerate, delightful, encouraging, and so on. If you're noticing your main character does a lot of mean actions, you might use words like angry, bossy, cruel, dark, disrespectful, evil, harsh. If you're noticing that your character is sad, some of the words you might use are antisocial, comfortless, depressed, down, friendless, gloomy, and so on. So these are good character trait words that describe a character on the inside. Now, way back in Unit 1, we did all have a mentor text called The Tiger Rising, and the teachers read these aloud to the students. Our main character in that story was Rob. Some of the character traits that we discussed when we were talking about Rob were depressed. The evidence for that was he was sad because of his mother's death, and he frequently talked about stuffing his feelings in a suitcase and trying not to open up that suitcase. And so those are good evidence points to the character trait of depressed. Another character trait that for Rob is lonely. Some evidence to that is he really lacked friends. He didn't have a lot of friends before he finally met Sistine. He really only talked to his dad and the principal and Willie Mae, but he didn't really talk to anybody of his age. And then another character trait for Rob would be timid. And that word means that he lacks confidence. Um, Evidence for that is he didn't speak up or stand up against bullies when they were being awfully mean to him. He just didn't stand up. He would just look down and try not to give eye contact to those characters. So this is a way of showing that with Tiger Rising, and it's a good review of work that we've already done before. Now, hopefully you've had a chance to listen to Mrs. Wilgenbush's read aloud of chapter 3 for this story. We have a main character from the book Number the Stars, and her name is Anne Marie. Some character traits you might have been thinking about while you're listening to the story are she's very independent. She walks to and from school with Ellen and Kirsty without any adults with her. She also shows independence because she volunteered to visit the shop of Mrs. Hirsch to find a button for Mama, and she's willing to do this without adult help. Also, another piece of evidence for that is she was asked by her mother to watch her sister. So, even though she's only 10, she shows a lot of independence. Another character trait for Anne Marie is careful. She chose with Ellen and Kirsty to walk the longer way from school to avoid the soldiers. She didn't want to have any incidents or times of meeting up with the soldiers again. So she's very careful and makes good choices. Another character trait is curious. She's always asking her father why Mrs. Hirsch's shop is closed. She's wondering about Peter's secrets. She starts to think like a detective, where she wants to piece together clues and details of things that she's learning about when she's overhearing her parents talk. And she's really wondering and trying to together all those clues because she is so curious. Now that we've practiced with our mentor text, we would like you to practice. Be able to find this graphic organizer in your stapled papers that we sent home with you. We would like you to pick a character from your I Survive book, your book club book, and find 3 appropriate character trait words with evidence from the story to prove it. So have fun with that task and make sure that you take a picture of this graphic organizer after you fill it out and insert it to the document that your teachers are able to check. Remember, we're wanting students to only use one document, so you just keep the same document and go back in and out of it so that we don't have to try to find your work every single time. It's very helpful to us on our end to see your work in only one doc rather than a document for each lesson. The next thing would be to read 30 minutes and also doing your Newsella article with quiz questions. Thank you for tuning in.